All right. Where are we? Okay. What can you, as an individual non-white person, do about racial showcasing confusion? Answer: no matter how many millions of non-white people who are chosen by the white supremacists to receive fame and fortune for racial showcasing, do not be tempted to blame any non white person for any non justice harm that is done to anyone, white or non white, as the dominant cause. Always blame the white supremacists. If you are chosen to be racially showcased, always do your best to inform all non white people that you are being racially showcased. Enjoy the material comforts that you receive, but also do your best to inform as many non white people as you can of the fact that you will not be allowed to help them very much. Do all that you can to use every one of your racial showcasing experiences as a learning experience and seeking ways of using what you learn to be of constructive help to other non white people in need. Do this do this every chance you get until forced to stop. Keep in mind that racial showcasing is no more than racial confusion through illusion, designed to do no more than support the practice of white supremacy racism in its more refined, hidden form. At any time, expect the white supremacists to select or force you or some non-white person closely associated with you to be racially showcased. Under some circumstances, expect large but carefully calculated numbers of non-white people to be racially showcased in support of white supremacy in all areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Do not allow fear, frustration, anger, disgust, jealousy, or confusion to tempt you into saying or doing harm to those non white people who are being racially showcased. Avoid speech and or action against anyone being showcased. Non-white person, being showcased, non-white person chosen for fame and success by the white supremacists. And if you are chosen, do your best to use the showcase position to counter the racist effects that the position was produced for. When making remarks about anyone who is said to be racially showcased, always limit what you say to the following: he said what he said, or she said what she said, or he did what he did, or she did what she did. Do not say anything else about him or her. Do, however, speak and or act in opposition to the white supremacists who are producing, maintaining, expanding, and or refining the practice of racial showcasing confusion. Avoid naming names of specific persons. Speak in general terms about effects, not persons. 5. Racial sexual confusion. Racial sexual confusion is the white supremacists speaking and or acting to best help dominate and mistreat non-white people by adding to, subtracting from, multiplying and or dividing the meaning of sex, non-sex, equal sex, lay sex, male, female, man, woman, gender, sexual deviation, etc. The white supremacists sometimes speak and act to scramble the meaning of sex. They sometimes describe acts that are not sex acts, but that are not sex acts as being acts that are sex acts. At other times, they describe the same or similar acts as being sex acts or sexual suggestive acts. In matters that are directly or indirectly associated with sex, the white supremacists will say and do anything that they have reason to believe will result in confusion and or self-destruction or self-destructive behavior between and among non-white people. The white supremacists promote dishonesty and confusion in all things sexual that directly or indirectly involve non-white people. They apparently have concluded that artificiality and confusion are essential in their strategy of weakening and wrecking all that is constructive in the activities of non-white people. The white supremacists have so far succeeded in distorting, twisting, and generally corrupting the constructive value of everything associated with the sexuality of the non white people of the known universe. They have promoted the destruction of the will of the non white people to think, speak, and act to produce the constructive essence and joy of quality sexuality. The white supremacist races promote scrap sex. They promote counter sex, anti sex, sexual contempt, gender contempt, etc. All of which is deliberately designed to give greater strength to the system of white supremacy. Through the promotion of racial sexual confusion, the white supremacists intend to prevent non white males from ever being men, evolving into manhood. They intend for non white males to remain boys. As boys, non white males, while remaining subject to the system of white supremacy racism, are expected to function in a weak and acutely dependent, childlike condition. The white supremacists also intend to prevent non white females from ever functioning as or being recognized as woman. They intend for non white females to always be required to think, speak, and act as infantile, emotionally immature girls, while also remaining in a weak, acutely dependent, childlike condition. The white supremacists intend to continue to abuse and confuse non white people in all areas of activity, especially in anything that involves sexual considerations. The white supremacists, racist man and racist woman collectively, speak and act to do whatever will best result in sexual confusion between, among, and against the non-white people of the known universe. The white supremacists engage in carefully controlled sexual intercourse and carefully planned acts of so-called homosex and lesbian sex with, among, against the non-white people of the known universe. They do anything they believe will result in the greatest and most destructive chaos, conflict, and confusion between, among, and against the non-white people. They calculate in advance how such chaos, conflict, and confusion in matters of sex that will result in the most damage to the non-white people, while adding greater power to the system of white supremacy racism. Sexual confusion among non-white people is one of the major ways that the white supremacists maintain, expand, and or refine the practice of white supremacy. This also helps them to promote racial confusion illusion. One of the major sexual conditions the white supremacists desire for many non-white people is for large numbers of non-white males to want to be females, and large numbers of non-white females to want to be males. The entire gender diffusion confusion movement is part of the white supremacist opposition to non white people, evolving into universal man correctly relating to and with for universal woman. It is important to remember that all people, both white and non white, should at all times do all they can to evolve swiftly into universal man or universal woman. These terms, universal man and universal woman, applies to any male or female person who knows and understands truth and who used that knowledge and understanding in a manner that has produced justice and correctness in all places, in all areas of activity, including economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war counterwar. Question: what can you, as an individual non-white person, do about racial sexual confusion? Answer: during the existence of white supremacy, racism, do not engage in or help to promote any act of sexual intercourse or sexual play between any white person with any non-white person. Reason: when white people engage in sexual intercourse, sexual play, or so-called homosex or lesbianism with against non-white people during the existence of white supremacy, the greater result is always more chaos, conflict, and confusion among the non-white people, and more power to the system of white supremacy. During the existence of the system of white supremacy, it is correct to speak and or act to expose and counteract everything that helps to cause harm to non-white people through male female non-white conflict, so-called homosexual or lesbian sexual activity, white non-white sexual intercourse and or sexual play, etc. It is correct to codify all speech and action. During the existence of white supremacy, it is correct to not engage in or help to promote any act of so-called homosexuality, lesbianism, countersex, gender contempt, gender obliteration, and or sexual confusion. It is correct to not do or say anything to cause someone to be confused about your being or wanting to be male or female. Always make clear what you want to be in regards to sex. Inform everybody of any acts of sexual intercourse, sexual play, so-called homosex, or lesbianism that you have ever engaged in with a white person during the existence of white supremacy. The most destructive acts committed by the white supremacist racist against non-white people: sexual intercourse, sexual play, and or sexual confusion. Explanation: next to white supremacy racism itself, sexual activity is the second strongest political motivating force among the people of the known universe. The people who have dominant functional control or influence over the sexual expressions and or desires of other people also have dominant control over the basic motivations of those same people in other areas of expression, including economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, or war, counterwar. Any white person who engages in sexual intercourse with a non-white person under conditions dominated by white supremacy has done more to promote the maintenance, expansion, and or refinement of white supremacy than he or she could have done by any other means in any other area of activity. This is also true when a white person, under conditions dominated by white supremacy, commits a counter-sexual act, so-called homosexual act, with against a non-white person. Anything that a white person says or does that helps to promote such behavior and or promote sexual confusion of any kind among non-white people is, by doing so, practicing racism, white supremacy in its most destructive form. Notes: according to compensatory counter-racist logic, there is reason to believe that since the establishment of the system of white supremacy, racism, all so-called sexual social arrangements have failed to be the quality of relationships between people that they should be. All of these so-called relationships have been no better than tacky, and in other words, trashy or terroristic. There is reason to believe. There's reason to believe. There's reason to believe that the substantial part of the white supremacist, racist, racial sexual confusion strategy is to promote the concept that the vagina of the non-white female is of little or no value in the world of future sexual classifications. Since the beginning of the system of white supremacy, the white supremacists have consistently worked to disrupt and confuse any commitment by nature that attracts the non-white males and females to each other sexually in a constructive manner. Therefore, according to compensatory counter-racist logic, the practice of compensatory counter-racist sexuality and counter-racist genderism, sexual intercourse, and or sexual play between non-white males and non-white females exclusively, is the best and correct procedure to evolve, morph, and or mutate into non-white people fulfilling the basic concept of universal man and with for universal woman, people who practice justice and correctness. The promotion of artificial confused sexuality among the non-white people of the known universe is intended to be the most powerful strategy against the non-white people that the white supremacists have produced since the invention of white supremacy racism. Moving right along. Ooh, where did we end? All right, let's do it here. In other words, most visible blacks do not equate to black leaders. They are double agents who intentionally represent everyone, all races, ethnicities, cultures, religions, genders, and classes. They skillfully identify black issues, but propose minority solutions to address them. They do not even purport to represent black interests. However, whites, the media, and those seeking to influence blacks accept their symbolic leadership. Most visible blacks are wedded to playing party politics, towing the line as politically correct individuals, and identifying with mainstream issues. They demonstrate more self-interest. They demonstrate more self-interest. They demonstrate more self-interest than group interests and deliver no tangible nor measurable benefits specifically to their own race. Whether they pretend to be colorblind or simply do not recognize the suffering of their own people, they seem to relish engagement in symbolic activities that are meaningless. Symbolic leaders ignore the exceptionalism of blacks and proclaim inaccurately that all groups have contributed equally to the development of this nation. When they accepted the myth that blacks are not treated any differently than any other ethnic or population group, it became easy to neutralize or obscure blacks and their historical exceptionality As the loose purpose of the civil rights movement expanded and became more diffused, black leaders and would-be leaders found more comfort and safety in advocating for realization of the dream of a colorblind society than fighting for a more self-sufficient and competitive black America. They are now so colorblind they cannot even see their own black color. As a result, black America increasingly views symbolic leadership as irrelevant and harmful to the black struggle for survival. The years between the 1870s and 2017 have been a transition period for black leadership. It has gone from practically no leadership during slavery to symbolic leadership in which in what is incorrectly labeled by some a post-racist society. In the early 1800s, black ministers provided monitored leadership for free and non-free blacks. These leaders were appointed by the white power structure, which also instructed the ministers in what they could and could not say. After the Civil War, few elected officials, community activists, and businessmen joined ministers in the leadership ranks and began shaping a black overclass. In the 1960s, black leaders were community activists, ministers, and civil rights organizers who collectively pushed Congress to enact new voting rights laws. Those laws resulted in a large number of black elected officials who became the new overclass and began the shift to symbolic leadership from the previous black focused community activists, ministers, and civil rights organizations. What happened to black leaders in a socio-political context is so critically important that it demands further elaboration, even at the risk of being repetitious. In the 1970s, government made aggressive efforts to shift focus from blacks to fabricated classes. Civil rights activists acquiesced, and new social movements filled the vacuum, sparked by the simultaneous social impact of a massive inflow of immigrants from developing nations and the growing momentum of the women's liberation movement. The public policy of political correctness also took hold, cemented the public policy of political correctness also took hold, cemented the refocus of official attention from blacks to women and newly created minority groups. President Richard Nixon's public policy of benign neglect was successful and caused the public and private sectors to lessen their interest in blacks and to shift to women, minorities, and immigrant groups. Black leaders and their respective organizations were successfully persuaded to abandon their own people and to take up the cause of broad and ambiguous groupings under the facades of diversity, multicultural minorities, and people of color. Never before has any religious, gender, ethnic, or language group been required to shift their attention away from their own people. Once black leadership was marginalized and incorporated into this system of political correctness, there was little that they could do to address the needs of black Americans. Apparently, they did not suspect that once inside, they would become irrelevant. Since they were politically separated from their own people, they had no means to pressure the power structure. No other group, European whites, Jews, Asians, Arabs, or American Indians, was expected to divorce itself intentionally from its culture and primary group. In politics, the detachment of black elected officials gives them the latitude to promise nothing and deliver nothing to the black electorate, which continually votes for them as a bloc. Electing blacks to public office, electing blacks to public office, therefore, has made no measurable difference in the quality of life for black Americans or the status quo in racial disparities. The black electorate receives no direct relationship, tangible or measurable, tangible or measurable, tangible or measurable benefits from electing a black person to a public office. In the 30-year time period between 1960 and 1990, the number of black elected officials increased from 103 to over 9,000, which constitutes a 9,000% increase in the total number of black elected officials across America. Yet, when comparing the social discomfort indicators in 1960 with the indicators in 1990, after a 9,000% increase in the number of black elected officials, the conditions of black Americans did not improve, but worsened. The parallels are apparent today. In 2017, which suggests there is no direct connection between blacks electing a political candidate into public office and receiving tangible benefits for their vote, such as increased employment, business ownership, improved housing, functional schools, safe streets, medical services, and income, social acceptance, political power. These observations seem to hold true even when assessing the legacy of President Barack Obama, known as the nation's first African American president. At the end of his presidency, black people were in the same state they were in before he was elected to the highest office in the land. In summary, the white overclass response to the civil rights movement was typically slow and most often symbolic. They rejected nearly everything that required a substantive change in the racial status quo. The old line, the old line civil rights organizations have failed to address the historical legacies and dilemmas of black America. Most blacks recognized by the general public as leaders are simply tools that the white overclass uses to keep the black masses placated and black neighborhoods under control, non-competitive and powerless. Symbolic black leadership has become largely irrelevant in the struggle for black survival and socioeconomic competitiveness. They will continue to routinely appear in print and electronic media to support or discuss non-black issues. They will boast about racial progress and minority political alliances to justify their appeal to white society for financial support. Sadly, at the same time, the black masses will sink further into a permanent underclass status. Pitiful. Pitiful. All right, time to exercise.